let's get started. Here are the current topics. So this is just a proposal. You've obviously been working on stuff on your own. So
Yeah.
do you want to go through this as is, or do you want to change it up?
I think as this is fine. Maybe we should change the order somewhat and do the dynamic styling discussion later.
Okay.
Or
Can you see this?
yeah.
The preview. Nice.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
So we can do that at the end. And what else do you want to shuffle around?
I think this is fine. So we can just start with what's landed in Imba 2. So I did merged a few pull requests earlier this week and also or last week, and also posted a status update. I think much of the syntax is being finalized now. Like it's starting to feel stable, at least for me in my daily work. The big changes since the last meeting, I guess, is essentially that we've decided to for sure add implicit self again, like definitely. And with that, we are also removing the @ alias for self, so that you will no longer use @ to refer to self anywhere. @ is then now used for decorators instead, which I also posted an issue about and a pull request with some details and syntax stuff. I think the user-facing part of decorators is mostly done and will probably not change much. There might be some changes to how you define the decorators, but probably it will stay basically like it is now in the final release. Private methods, no private properties are still exist in the compiler. We haven't made a final decision yet, but I'm very much for dropping it. I guess we discussed this last meeting as well, did we?
I don't remember, to be honest. It's
I think we
far
did.
back.
But again, yeah, I just don't see now that we have implicit self, it's much easier to just essentially, if you just use an underscore in front of the property, then you could just use that as semi-private properties. And the implementation of private properties was semi-private anyways, because it was essentially just adding a prefix to the public properties.
Yeah, it was adding multiple underscores, right?
Yeah. So I think, in my opinion, I think we can drop it, and then we have the possibility to add some additional syntax later with the hash character. What's your opinion on this?
To be honest, like, I don't understand why we added them, because I'm thinking back at the time where we were talking about implicit self. Magnus was here, and you were, for some reason, you wanted to do the getter and setter stuff first, because it was supposed to do something easier. It was going to make something easier, right? So using the hash sign would compile down to using getters and setters, right?
Yeah.
No,
or the hash sign would essentially be like the new version of instance variables. Like you would essentially be able to rewrite all instance variables in code to private fields.
Yeah, I'm mixing it up with getters and setters. That's what I meant to say. I don't understand why we added that. But with the private methods, like I'm trying to think, like, yes, it would be nice in a way when you're designing an API.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, like, for me personally, like, I don't see the value in it currently, because like, when you're defining a view or a component, like, if you have stuff in there, you just start using it, and if you're trying to add something, this is private, it's not going to be exposed. Yes, it would be nice to have a like some syntax to mark it as such, but
Yeah.
it's not like, yeah, it's not one of the top things I care about, to be honest. So
No.
I think it's a good thing to have it, but I don't see like it's like if you go back to Objective-C, I used to write a lot of Objective-C before, and you
Yeah.
can just add an underscore, like
Yeah.
and then it's done, and that's essentially hidden. If you use the underscore and I'm exposing something to you, then you're on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So you don't really need a keyword or
no. And even like, to be honest, the idea of being able to hide some properties and methods from external interfaces interacting with your code, I actually found there to be a big problem with them being private, because in my internal library, I had, like, this is in a data store thing that we're writing in Imba 2. In the places where I actually wanted to hide some implementation details from the outside and used private fields, then I actually did want to access these private fields directly from other parts of the library, and that didn't work with private variables. But when you use underscore, you can optionally, like, if you do know what parts to access, it is possible. Like, I know that it's not recommended to be able to do that, but when you are working tightly within a single library, it sometimes makes sense to write code where you essentially know about the underlying hidden properties, etc., of the interfaces you're working with.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I get that part, but like if we look at the context API, I don't remember where I was using this, because I've been experimenting a lot with Imba too. So I actually have some like concrete stuff I would like to point out later. But in them, I had a couple of places in a code base where I needed some information further up, and I was a view further down, and then context, that felt really good to use when it was nested. Like, I don't want to pass in everything as a prop to further down. And so that's the only thing I see like as a nice thing from the whole hashtag experiment.
But the only, again, that was actually a challenge. The reason we did that with a hashtag was because it looks really weird when you use the @ when @ represents self, and you have a property. We couldn't use just plain context property, because we are actually defining properties directly on real DOM elements here. So it's useful to have the Imba specific parts under sort of another namespace, so that we don't collide if someone has defined a context property on a DOM element or something.
So where is that? Will that always be under a context thing?
Yes. So my proposal now, or actually someone else's proposal in the GitHub issues, is to just change it to $sign context, because $sign is usually used for semi-private or internal functionality in JavaScript, and for me that again makes sense. So Eric has proposed a few times to, and I've sort of agreed earlier, that we should add a shorthand for accessing context properties, like with $sign or something. But I'm not so sure. Like, I think we need to use it more, and I do think it is not healthy to encourage too much use of context, because
maybe we don't need context, but like, I don't know.
But I think it makes sense in many cases, but mostly for exposing, as we talked about earlier, API and root page and like relatively stable things. But you don't want to use context everywhere to access all sorts of different attributes that have been set further up in the tree, I think. But in the example we made, where you actually have an editable flag or property, and then you can use that from within elements to render them differently if so parts of the upper tree is flagged as editable. That sort of use case might make sense. And also the use case where you essentially want to have a global API or a global user or something accessible on all elements. But yeah, I think we should wait, not add a magical shorthand for accessing context properties for now, and then just use $sign context.
Yeah, so it's going to essentially become like this.
Yeah.
Cool. So I see that props and methods was noted down here. So this is the Ruby. I don't remember the name for it.
Yeah, it's essentially not the same as, so in Ruby, the first thing we implemented was predicate and
yeah, predicate was the name.
No, yeah, predicate is for methods that end with a question mark. But then they call it a bunch of different things, but dangerous methods is one of them. But I changed the behavior of that to actually, like a exclamation mark at the end of an identifier is essentially shorthand for open and close parentheses. Or it's like if you want to call a method without parameters, you can do it with the exclamation mark. And as I said a bunch of times, I think many people will probably think that that's weird and initially don't like it. I do think it will grow on you, and I'm pretty certain that it will be kept for final release.
Yeah, so I will definitely try to use it, but like for me, it just seems like syntactic sugar. Like I don't really see the value in it. It's basically just replacing parentheses. So it's not like I'm not getting any benefit on it as a developer. It's like -1 character basically.
But you can say that about it's essentially like, it makes it more readable, in my opinion. It is less typing, it is fewer characters. It makes sense. And you could use the same argument to oppose indentation based scoping, to oppose like not having closing tags in the tag trees. You could use the same arguments for lots of aspects of the language itself, and many of them will likely be valid arguments against it. But yeah, it is obviously just syntactic sugar.
Yeah.
But as long as the sugar is sweet, I at least want to include it.
So what are you thinking is going to be removed? Like if you compare it, I think this was something that came out of when I was talking to Eric about documentation. So is there like are there things like if you make a comparison with Imba 1, this is gone?
Are you talking about what is gone in related to Imba 1 or?
Yes.
So instance variables are obviously gone. I don't think, like, there aren't that many concepts gone from Imba 1. Like tag syntax and some tag semantics have changed. Obviously colon operator is gone. We only use dot now.
Nice.
Other than that, I don't think there are many things. But now that I've worked on the tooling for a long time, I do see that we will be able to create much better migration tools to convert Imba 1 code to Imba 2 now, because we can inspect much more of the classes and the structures. And as long as we can take a half decent guess as to whether a method call without arguments in Imba 1 is accessing a property or it is actually calling a method, if we could do that consistently, then we can mostly rewrite, like migrate the code perfectly. That's not true for tags though. So if you have large projects with a lot of custom tags, etc., it will be some changes because of how events are handled and things like that. But I'm hopeful that it will be a doable project to convert a big project like Scrimba to Imba 2. It will take some time and it will require some manual changes, but it will be easier now than I first anticipated, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds good. I was thinking, so yeah, what I was about to say was the VS Code extension. I tried using it. After getting the right version and everything, it's working. It works much better in Imba 2 code bases. In Imba 1, it's usable, so it's not really breaking anything. And also, I think the issue with switching the tabs is also gone for me, so I don't have to go back from the language server output back to the
that's, I think at least we've suppressed most of the logging. I'm not really sure when it pulled you back into that debugging tab, but yeah.
So it works with Imba 1, but the problem with Imba 1 is there's like no you don't get the same benefits as in a Imba 2 code base, so you don't get the auto completion. But I've also noticed bugs, so I've tried to note them down. Like there are some issues with like it's not doing that bad of code editing now. Previously, it used to do much worse things. Now what it does is sane. Like it can prepend some characters, so it's not like horrible. You can actually fix it fairly quickly when you're, for example, importing something and then it's trying to add the import statement.
Yeah, that's so one of the problems there is I actually filed a bug for that and we'll fix it. Like there's a problem with auto-completing paths when you're importing things. And there are still a bunch of bugs, obviously, but the foundations are improving, and I think it's pretty close to be a very good environment to.
Yeah, I definitely think so. This is like it's. I've said it a couple of times. I think it's great work. This is definitely an improvement for everyone who's going to be writing Imba. Like, but you're going to get the most benefit with Imba 2, and it's going to be. This is competing with Vue-like tooling. There is still like some things that are missing with regards to. No, actually, with Imba specific debugging, but you can, since Imba is integrated with all of these other things, like, for example, if you set the pause on the debug in Chrome and it crashes and then you stop and you can see the source map, you see the exact Imba line, it's getting really, it's still a while left, but like it's getting closer to first class tooling support.
Yeah, I agree.
So is there any, like, do you think we should do the VS Code demo this month or should we delay it even more?
I think we can do one this month. There's a lot of 3 weeks left of this month. Like closer to the end of the month, I think. But we can also start to, I was thinking about just creating some GIFs of the various features and post them on Twitter and stuff to just.
So we could record a video and then create GIFs from the video.
Yeah.
Or create the GIFs separately. Yeah.
So even though a lot of things are still buggy, especially the auto import stuff is just fantastic. I know people have been used to that from JavaScript and TypeScript already, but being able to do that in Imba is just extremely helpful. And the same goes for I lost the.
Sorry.
I lost it.
Well, what did you lose? The screen?
No, my thoughts.
Oh, okay. I
I just
was thinking
don't
it was the
remember.
screen because like when I switch tabs, sometimes Zoom, like let
Yeah.
me try it now. Can you see my screen now?
Let me see. I'm in the document. Yeah, I can see the screen.
Oh, you can still see it because it says,
Yeah.
oh no, I think Zoom is pausing it. If you switch the window, it's gonna pause. So it's
No, but I can see that the cursor is blinking in
okay,
the Google
but
Docs.
how about now? Is it still blinking?
No, no, now it's paused. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually pretty cool. Zoom is doing some
Yeah,
cool stuff. Mm.
definitely.
So one thing I was thinking, I wanted to show you some code, but I think I'm gonna save that for later because I
Yeah.
tried like I have this dot file things that I've been honing and optimizing for many years, and it's
Yeah.
like it can set up a whole machine for me, like either a
Hmm.
server, and it's gonna be the way I prefer it. It
Yeah.
clones repositories, it sets up a window manager, compiles it, and stuff like that. So I've been first I had it in Bash, and then I wrote it in rewrote it in Ruby, and then in TypeScript, and then now I
Hmm.
rewrote it in Imba 2.
Hmm.
And initially I was having issues, but you fixed most of them. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think like you can definitely if if you're using the FS stuff with the auto completion,
Yeah.
really nice. The indentation stuff was very painful, but when you set the settings correctly and then get it initially the setup, it works. So
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. But I'm not sure like marketing Imba as a full stack language. It's yeah, it you can use it for server side stuff, and it's gonna get much better than before.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still think it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Like, do you still think that it's the right approach to market Imba as a full stack friendly language?
Uh, I think it's the right approach, and then just strive to accomplish that. Because I already think that one of the benefits of Imba is that you can definitely, if you're starting a new project from scratch and you're considering Imba,
Mm.
I really do think you should use Imba on the front end and on the back end. So yeah, there will still be bugs, and there were bugs with that in Imba 1 as well. But most of them are just bugs. They're not like fundamental problems in the design of the language. And since they're just bugs, the main reason they aren't fixed is that we haven't really used it for a lot of server side stuff yet. So when these things get fixed, I do think that it will be yeah, it is a nice full stack language. The missing thing is probably better like magical CSS integration, but that's a whole different discussion that we're gonna get back to, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, I think like with regards to the full stack part, the only problem is tooling. So if this integration with the
I think I
way,
lost you there for a moment. The only problem is
can you hear me now?
I
Can you hear
just
me now? Test,
yeah.
test.
Yeah, I can hear you. I just lost my AirPods.
Oh yeah, okay, I see.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to say is like based on what I've seen,
Yeah.
the way I've used it, it's the tooling. That's what I think is going to be the challenge. I don't think the CSS stuff or the styling stuff I'm thinking about backend development, like using Imba to create endpoints, using it for server side, like integrating with other libraries, and like you're doing stuff on the server.
Yeah.
I think it's already there
Yeah.
because it really just harnesses all of the JavaScript infrastructure essentially
Yeah.
because it's running on Node. So you're not reinventing Node,
Yeah.
but it's just yeah, maybe it's just the VS Code part. Like if that works really nicely, and then yeah. So I think the other thing would be the import stuff. Like here is my module, my servers. I'm using some kind of library for doing here is the server, setting up the server, and then importing and requiring and all of that. I'm not really sure that is solved.
What do you mean? Like, are you actually looking at an example now, or?
No, I'm not looking at an example now. I'm just looking at the Google Docs.
But do you think, like, how is it not solved if you compare it to JavaScript?
Because right now, like the way I understood it, like, will we end up with a common JS? Like, do we support common JS, or like when I was using it, I've had issues. So maybe some of the issues I've had are solved, and I need to retry this again.
Yeah, I think they are. I think there are still some issues with common JS compilation for Node. But that are for edge cases when you use complex import export syntax. But the things you ran into were most definitely bugs, like the ones that you mentioned to me. Was that was just
but I haven't mentioned all of the issues I've met. Like, I've just noted them down. So I've just mentioned the ones which have been really painful.
Yeah. But I guess if things, any issue related to import and export should be easy to fix. Like that is essentially, we are just compiling things to JavaScript. There are just like if we never manage to fix common JS compilation, we could even just fall back to running the compiled code through a minimal Babel compiler that compiles ESM to C common JS. So that's not a big issue. Like, that is definitely in the domain of bugs, as I would call it, where these things are going to be fixed. So I don't think that is definitely not something that should hinder us from calling it a full stack language. There might be other things, but that is not it.
So I'm definitely going to use Imba more on the server side.
Yeah.
And then get back with more feedback, because I think there are still some edge cases left, and I think those edge cases might come up more frequent than expected.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Cool.
But I agree. Like, I still haven't used Imba 2 for any server-side thing, or I've used it for libraries like the tooling and some other libraries, but I haven't really tried creating a project yet that combines server-side and client-side with rendering and stuff. So we will run into more bugs, and that's one of the reasons that we're not reached a final version yet, I guess.
Nice. So let's see. The next topic was something from Eric. I don't remember what this is, but I'm just going to open it up. Can you see the example?
Let me see. I just need to switch the sound. Yeah, I can see the example. Yeah.
And I think it's changed since I looked at it. Have you looked at it before?
No, but I was looking at it now myself. So.
Yeah. So how? Yeah. Now I think I see it. So this button info thing. So do you get the? So I think it's just like, if you have some state in some scope further up, and then you're passing it downwards. Like, how do you bind to that state and then get all of the changes to that? That's what I'm assuming is asking for here. Let's see, there's also a cool button.
Data. Pass. Global. Yeah, is this not? I'm not sure if I understand the whole context around this. Is this not behaving as it should be?
Let's see.
Because I'm still kind of not sure about the syntax for binding things, but to me the example looks like it's working the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, it looks, maybe it didn't work at some point, and then either you or I updated the Imba version.
I kind of agree. So I guess that there are two ambiguous things about the example, and one of them is that I can see that the second button, you might assume that this will also change, like the data for that will also change when you click the local button moon, you change the data internally in the local button, and then you might expect the data to change back to button info on the next render. Do you catch what I'm talking about?
No, can you repeat it?
Let me see on your screen. So when you click the second button there, the second local button,
yeah,
then internally it will change the data value to moon, right? I can see that you would think that if AppRoot renders again, then the data property of that same button will change back into button info. You might assume that to be like the way it works. But yeah, I think it's difficult to really start a whole discussion about this now. To me, it looks like it actually works the way it's intended to work.
Yeah, but let's focus on the question. So, like, how do we do data binding in Imba v2 in nested components? Like, if you have two components and you want to access, like, something, there is a state in the top level. We can use like a module as an example. Like, there is a module, and you want to know when something in the model is changed from the container that's presenting the model. Does it make sense?
I'm not sure it makes sense that you want to know when something is changed. I do think I need a better example, like a better use case, because the whole concept of Imba is exactly that. You essentially don't listen to changes or track changes. You essentially write an actual declarative view, and then you expect it to reflect the state without introducing like tracking and watching when certain parts of certain properties changes. But if you do want like data binding in nested components, there are many real world use cases for it. Something like if you want to create a rich input field where you just have you want to link the value of that rich input field to some property of some other object. Yeah, again, it's not easy to explain without just being able to write it out. But the current syntax that we do now is if you do bind colon and then the property on tag, it will essentially create, instead of setting the property, it will essentially magically create a getter and a setter on that local button that will change the value that you sent in. But where did you get this question from? Is it from a larger context in an issue or a post on users.imba?
Also, I think this might have been a topic we did discuss, me and Eric, or it might have come from one of the example applications I've been trying to make.
Okay.
So I think it comes back to the model. So what I can do is I can go through those examples and then try to either show you the whole example or isolate them separately.
Yeah.
So I can come back to this and then try to
give you more. If you show me the whole example, I'm pretty sure I can answer and show how you would do it.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. So so what are you thinking is next for V2 now?
Now that I'm finally feeling that most of the syntax has landed, I am still working on tooling with the dog fooding philosophy, where I try to use Imba, and whenever the tooling annoys me, then I try to go back and fix that part. Other than that, I'm actually starting to my feeling is that that we are very close to the time where we need to start focusing on documentation and maybe the website and maybe a guide. Like Svelte and most of the other sites have, where we also get to use Imba too a little while writing these things. I'm kind of paralyzed when it comes to, I have so many different big projects that need to be migrated, and at the same time cleaned up and refactored and restructured and pulling functionality out into external packages. And so there are so many things there that I don't feel confident really tackling any of them before we publish Imba 2, because it could take way too long. So the most important thing now is to now that I think most of the concepts have landed, it is time to start working much more on the documentation and the examples and stuff.
Yeah, so I'm like very skeptical that it's like, okay, so if the big concepts have landed,
yeah,
then it's just bugs. But if the concepts have not landed,
yeah,
then like the documentation is essentially going to be worthless, or we are going to have to revamp it again, because like maybe you use it even more, and then you'll see, oh, this actually really does suck, or there's a better way to do this specific thing, or oh, maybe we should change these fundamental concepts in Imba. So do you think like that's not going to happen?
I think it is less and less likely to happen, and it's drastically less likely to happen now than it was even 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So what kind of things have you tried writing? Because I remember when we were talking, you focused on this data layer thing, and it seems like it's very, for me, like when I hear that initially when you were talking about it, it seemed like a good idea, but over the weeks after, it just seems like a very isolated topic, like a very, like, seems very far off from a real world thing. So
yeah, are you talking about like if I can write that single library flawlessly, then that obviously doesn't mean that all the concepts are working well, right?
No, like that part is like very optimized to like, it's not part of a whole application. It's like, it is very simple. It just has maybe a very small view or just one view, and then it's just rendering out stuff. And then most of the stuff is not like it seems very very artificial. It's a very artificial setup.
Yeah, so I agree that so this is a question of whether we're talking about releasing Imba 2 or releasing Imba 2 with the libraries and frameworks and the ecosystem that you will eventually need to create large applications easily. And I definitely agree that we're not ready for the second part, but I do think things like routing, I'm getting closer to I'm starting to think that it might be smart to just get the language out there relatively soon now, and not have like perfect routing ready to go in 2.0 and things like that. And the main reason I am quite confident that most of the major concepts have landed is that, except removing colon, replacing it with dot, and a few other things like that, moving variable declarations and destructuring assignments and stuff closer to ES6, I think that most of the concepts are now relatively similar to what they were in Imba 1. And since we've been using Imba 1 so much for so long, I am quite confident that we won't radically change many of the concepts now. So we might definitely add more features to the language at some point, but yeah, I'm just
like I get that you want to release, and I think and that's also something I really want.
Yeah.
But like I'm not sure, like if you look at the web component stuff, right?
Yeah.
and the relationship between what was Imba tag wrappers or the wrapper stuff from Imba 1. Like, I don't see how, like, are those issues resolved? Like, how Imba v1 tags were used and how the web component stuff works? Are there, like, do they work equivalent, like, or are there going to be issues between them? Like, it seems like, I don't know, maybe this has been resolved
with issues. So that's, as I wrote in the last update, I do think that this is the one part that needs some more work, is, or there are other parts obviously, but this is the main part that I think still needs a lot of work, is the whole web component inheriting from native elements, things like that. You could tighten it and for now say that you can't inherit from native tags and just be done with that. It works. It's not perfect, but it works for most cases. Are you talking about specifically being able to use this together with Imba 1 code, or just in general, like how the tag concepts have changed?
I'm just thinking, like, I'm thinking out loud here. So I'm assuming the Imba code, Imba v2 code you have written has mostly been either the template, or in the Imba repository you have these apps. So I'm assuming the most of Imba v2 you have written is very isolated things. It's not like a part of an application where you're trying out to build either a small app, which is more real world like. So it seems like we're going to hit issues when people start actually using this for real apps.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to hit issues. I don't think we're going to hit many issues that we didn't also hit in Imba 1 and still hit in Imba 1. But it is difficult for me to see, like, how do we actually hit these issues without either releasing it relatively soon and work on the documentation while we improve these concepts, or number two, create more projects using this internally for who knows how long, and then eventually being able to release it. I'm still I'm not saying that we should release it like this week at all, but for me, I think that it is close enough that I would be confident, for example, to actually start rewriting Imba.io with some fancy Imba 2 stuff, and then along the way just tackle whatever problems we meet. And then if we manage to write that site without many problems, and the data layer I wrote and the widgets I've been writing for, like auto-completing text fields and menus and popovers and stuff, then I do think it's getting close.
So, like, when are you like, are you expecting to do this for the summer, like you mentioned, or
to do what?
To make the release? So this is Imba 2.
Yeah, I definitely think we have to be able to do that before this summer.
Why do we have to do that?
Because the longer it drags out, the longer a few people will continue writing Imba 1 code, the longer it will take before we can confidently start to fully migrate our code bases to Imba 2. And in my experience, it's finding all these problems and solving them will take so much longer if we do it fully in private, just creating some random examples. I do agree that we need to create real world applications in Imba 2. That's one of the things I've been championing from the beginning. But I don't think I'm not sure. I think we should create like a huge new project using Imba 2 from the start, or convert a huge project using Imba 2 before we actually release Imba 2.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying, and it's going to be interesting to see how it's going to work out in practice.
Yeah.
And if there are going to be major issues, or maybe there are just minor stuff, just bugs. But I'm still like, yeah, I want to use Imba 2 more and then see, because like I'm still not sure on how to write idiomatic Imba 2, and like just the modal stuff seems like I'm not really sure how to do that in a good way without the code getting really messy.
Model, are you talking about models as in the UX pattern, or
Yes,
models like data binding?
No, models, like not model. So you're presenting something to the viewer.
Yeah.
And then you want to dismiss it, or you save, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that was even further from trivial in Imba 1, I guess. Like still.
Yeah.
But I can show you some examples. I am going to this week, I hope, play around more with examples and possibly, as I said, start on the Imba website. But I have already created some context menus and stuff like that I can show you.
Yeah, it would be cool to see like some examples on what you're thinking, because like one thing I'm trying very hard to do is avoid looking at the Scrimba or Gitspeak code base when I'm working on, like, if I want to experiment with Imba 2, I want to try out something. It's easy to go and check those code bases, but sometimes I want to actually publish the stuff. So I don't use Scrimba or Gitspeak as reference for those. And the Yuxa stuff is it's really hard to use, because like you can't really like look at stuff, because the repository in itself is very bare. Like you actually don't know how to run this. But
that's good. Do you think that so what do you think needs to happen before we release it? I know that we need to nail the concepts and make sure it works, but in practice, like, what steps would you think is the way forward?
I think one other thing I'm not sure about is like if you're like are using if you're using vanilla JavaScript, you have all of these various APIs. And I wish like Imba could simplify a lot of the, like it already does it, right? With the DOM stuff, it already simplifies many things. Like, but it would be amazing if it could go even further. Like you could just look at a really, imagine you have a marketing campaign, really complex page with certain elements and so on, with animation and stuff, and it's just not obvious how to do those. And you can do them with vanilla JavaScript and HTML, CSS, SVG, and so on. But it's like a lot of work, and you have to do a lot of setup stuff. And even just the Imba unmount example, like so if Imba could just hide away all of these DOM stuff, and make it like super easy to work with SVG, to work with. So now I'm talking about it abstractly, so I don't know if it makes any sense. So that you would never have to resort to the DOM APIs or the vanilla JavaScript APIs. They're essentially just hidden away with rich concepts. So, but I feel like with Imba 2 now, currently, you have to manipulate the DOM. You have to, and that may be because just stuff hasn't worked. So instead of reporting the bug properly, we just try to find a workaround in vanilla JavaScript APIs.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like if you are using append child and remove child and those sorts of DOM APIs in Imba 2, then you have probably encountered some sort of bug and then just try to figure out some hacky way to make it work, because you're not supposed to do that. And I really can't see myself succumbing to that in the current state of Imba now, if I were to write some larger applications. But what is needed is more examples and me to actually show how you can do these different things and point out like why you shouldn't do this here, and see what you are trying to achieve, and then show how that would be done in Imba 2. But the same goes for Imba 1. I think it's a dangerous path if we want to, as you talked about, for the final release, like provide more rich APIs that will simplify the JavaScript APIs and the DOM APIs, because that is much more difficult to, you can't really know whether you've nailed that or not unless you really use it for a long time and evolve it while you're using it. And that's what we have done with a lot of the tag stuff in Imba, because Imba started with tags like 9 years ago or whatever, and slowly we added the event syntax that was inspired from you, because I used that a lot. And Imba 2 is essentially most of the concepts that have been verified and are working nicely, cleaned up and removed some of the older parts that are not really usable or are kind of deprecated. And that process has taken 8 years. So if we wanted to, let's say we wanted to now improve the way you handle data or improve the way you handle requests to the server or whatever, then I think still for a long time that will should be in userland, or should be as other libraries that people create. And then when you've used them for a long time and validated them and modify them, then you can start looking into like pulling them into the language as more first-class citizens of the language.
Yeah, I totally get it, and I understand. I do, but that's like it was just to show you, like, from the examples that I've tried to make, and I'm gonna make them public, the ones that yeah. So for the next round of Imba testing and using Imba 2, I'll definitely make sure to make everything public, so I can actually just send you a link instead. And have no shame about the code style and just show it to you, because it's kind of embarrassing, right? When you write stuff, you don't know, is this like this? It works, but it looks very messy when I'm looking at it. So so the next thing for Imba 2 is release and get people to use this more, really, because if like what I'm worried about is like if we make the V2 release and we have no big user of Imba V2, it kind of sucks, because
and
like,
we have no
big user, like no one is really using Imba 2 at that point in production, and I want it to be used in production, so just so we can say we're using it in production. And that's why I opened up the one pull request for the one Scrimba thing. So but so maybe that's one place, just bundler stuff, maybe we can merge that, and then just to have the one sentence, we're actually using this stuff in production. So I think I would be happy with that, just to have that one liner, because it would be like, it doesn't feel right to actually ship a specific version and not be using it ourselves in some capacity in production.
So if, now that you talk about it, if we wanted to go the extreme way in the way you are kind of proposing, then an alternative here would also be to say that we are going to migrate Scrimba, the whole Scrimba code base, 100%, and then just spend basically all our time doing that until that is ready to ship. And then we can say that after we've done that, because that touches on so many parts of writing an application, then after we've done that, then we can safely say that Imba 2 is ready for production. That is another potential path forward that I am open to discuss, but I'm just afraid that it will be a insane undertaking, just because even if it is very similar, even if we can migrate a lot of the stuff manually, it's so easy to start cleaning up things and refactoring things while you're also migrating, and then you essentially just start on a huge new branch of cleaning up.
Yeah, so this is one of the, like, I'm not going to get into private stuff, but this is one of the challenges when we're working together, is like, you want to do the elegant approach. Let's do this nice and clean.
Yeah.
And figure it out. But I'm for the Kaizen approach. Let's take small baby steps all of the way. Like, we're going to reach the end, but we're going to take small gradual steps. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, let's introduce Imba v2 in one specific part of the Scrimba application, and then let it grow into the rest of the application, instead of let's rewrite everything or let's migrate everything now. Like, if we have an attack vector a way in, then we can like start rewriting parts. And if you look at the way the Imba v2 stuff works, you can actually drop in, and I really love it. You can drop in Imba v2 into an existing application and start using it. So like, the way you can start using Imba v2 is so much easier than Imba 1. So of course there are challenges, like, for example, like if you have the data layer in Scrimba, how do you like transition? Like, how do you go from this web component to that other part, or how do you share user stuff between those two, like the boundaries? But I think those are special cases, and I think just thinking about them, they shouldn't be that big of a challenge. Like, for example, making all of the user-facing stuff in Scrimba static. I think that should be a nice Imba v2 project without really changing the core, without really changing the editor stuff. Like, does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. We have discussed this at length before, and I think we are probably we agree about many of the aspects and disagree about some.
Yeah,
I definitely see that if we were to tackle that project, we should at least start by separating the editor and the actually casting technology and the rest of the site, and start injecting Imba 2 in one of them, not both at the same time.
Oh yeah, that makes sense, to separate them and then only use it on one side.
But I do think it is, I have been trying and thinking about this for a long, just wait one second. I have been thinking about this for a long time and gone back and forth 100 times about the best approach to migrating this code base. And there are many challenges as well with being able to start adding a few small Imba 2 parts here and there. So I agree that that's a great way to do it if we can manage to do it, but it's just
and you know one of the reasons I really like it is because, like, if we do that, I'm not saying we should do it, even though it seems like it when I'm thinking about it. Like, if you think about, can you hear me? Yeah, so if you think about, like, let's say you have a random Django shop somewhere in the US, like, they have a huge Django code base. They're going to experience certain issues when they try to use Imba, right? And I think, like, some of those issues, there's going to be overlap if we try to use Imba v2 in existing Imba 1. If we go the incremental gradual route, I think we can experience some of the issues they would have. And and it feels like it's more real world. It's like you are actually working with something that is real, and you're not trying to make big radical change at once, but you're trying to transition. And that's more, in my opinion, I'm not saying this is the truth, in my opinion, this is more realistic, you have a big code base, you want to try out this new fancy thing, it seems interesting, and I think like we have an appeal to Python and Ruby developers, and I think they have existing code bases, and it's going to be like, I think if they have a nice process of trying out Imba, and it's not like a big all or nothing, but it's like something that you can start using, and they can feel that the tooling and the ecosystem supports gradual usage, and I think, yeah, we can have a better chance of adoption in those communities.
Yeah, I definitely agree. In those communities, I definitely agree. And in those communities, it is not good enough now. I totally agree about that, that ideally this is mostly still for starting projects from scratch.
Yeah.
I don't think I think that's still a pretty common scenario as well, though.
I don't think that, because like if you look at Vue, if you look at I haven't used Vue for many years, but I've the few years I've used Vue, like I was really impressed at how easy it was to put it into a legacy code base. It's like so easy to just like the first time I used Vue in production, I didn't bootstrap a new project. Like first time I used it was with a existing large WordPress site, and I just, in one of the places where the head was being built, just added a script and then started to use it, and then it started to use more of that. And that's like, it's very isolated. Vue did not have any opinion on the tooling. It let you add it easily in there. And I think many developers around the world are actually, I'm not saying the majority, but I think many are using and being exposed to Vue like that. They have a day job, they have an existing app or existing stuff running, and they can't just rewrite it, or they don't have the budget for that. And Vue lets them just, bam, add it easily, create their apps, and they can even have multiple Vue apps in their big existing app, and then gradually rewrite stuff.
Yeah. I definitely I buy the appeal. I'm just not sure how.
So we don't have to make a decision, and maybe my opinions here are like too biased, but I think there is value in considering a new approach, like the big changes, radical changes at once approach is like yeah, it's, I think it has its place, but it's it is taxing. And
for me, I think we definitely agree about a core principle, and that is the Kaizen. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, Kaizen.
The Kaizen. So okay. I'm using that approach internally. So if you just take the developing the Scrimba, the core technology of Scrimba as a concept, I definitely, the whole idea is to gradually experiment and change things up really rapidly and try it out all the time to just like mold it into what you want it to be. I guess almost every developer works that way, but the thing is that my experience is that when you also expose this process externally, like when you always do that in production, when you always change up things live, especially after you started acquiring real users, then it's starting to become kind of taxing as well, because you suddenly need to consider so many, like take Imba for example. Like we ended up removing the @ alias again and reintroducing implicit self. And if we did that, like if we had released 2.0 final a long time ago and wanted to do the whole public gradual changes approach, then we are suddenly locked away from being able to do these things. So being able to experiment internally for quite some time, just taking the exact example of migrating Scrimba by starting to inject a tiny bit of Imba 2 here and there. My concern then is that you won't be able, because now we have started using Imba 2. Now it does work this way. You are suddenly forced to not change up too many things. because you will suddenly, it will be more difficult than to take it one step back and start seeing like, how can we make this work really well? I'm not sure if I'm explaining that too well.
Yeah,
but...
you are explaining it well. I understand what you're saying, but like, I think like you could be creative. Like, for example, yeah, maybe I'm simplifying it. So one thing I was thinking was you could go the other way. You could try to serve up static sites and then do server-side rendering. You could go a different route. You could have multiple processes that are running on the server, and then that get served differently depending on what parts of the application you're requesting. Like, there are possibilities. Like, I'm not saying they're easy. Of course, some of them are going to have complexity issues, like more complex than others and so on. Yeah, at least the one, if we go from currently, yeah, I don't want to go that much into it, but there are different application architectures we can use, and they will lend themselves better to rewriting stuff in Imba v2 than not, like compared to others. So you don't have to do it one specific way, and that's the only way. There are different approaches that might make it better for rewriting if you consider the application differently.
Yeah.
And change up how it works. But maybe that's not worth it. Maybe it's not. But I definitely think like targeting just the React folks out there is not necessarily the best approach to gain wider adoption of Imba. I'm very interested in the Ruby and the Python people out there, and what I'm trying to do is to think about, like, yes, it does cost more if you're going to do everything small gradually, and then you have legacy stuff. But in the real world out there, you actually do have legacy stuff that you have to take care of, that is important to you.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to dwell that much on it, but like, yeah, let's do it the way you've proposed, with just getting this Imba v2 release. And I'm going to try to follow up on all of the issues I see.
Yeah.
And I can also take just check the notes I have with the current issues.
Yeah.
So is there anything else on that Imba v2 track that we should, like, you mentioned the docs. I didn't note that down. Let me.
Yeah, I think we should start. I'm probably going to start playing around with implementing a new homepage as well. Just to test the language, and also we do need to change that for the release. And I'm not saying that definitely we should just rush a release now, but at least we should get to the point where I think it should be ready to release, and then we can take the discussion about actually making sure it works for more scenarios. And yeah, but as we remember, like, Svelte didn't really become that popular until Svelte version 3. I do think that we shouldn't be dead set on Imba 2 being the final, like, best solution to everything. But I think Imba 2 is already shaping up to be vastly better than Imba 1, especially with the tooling and everything. The faster we can get that into the hands of people who actually start using it, giving feedback, and try to use it for real stuff, then Imba 2.5 will suddenly be a fantastic alternative to Vue and React and Svelte and all the others. While Imba 2 will probably might still be to hardcore people who are kind of eager to dig into a new thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it sounds good. Like, at least I'm very excited about using it for real world stuff. So if you use it for the imba.io site, that's like, yes, it's not like a news website that has massive traffic, but it is a site that gets traffic. So it's going to be real people. Like, it's a real site. So that's cool. And I'm also excited about the potential for Playground. Like, I have actually started, maybe I can share that with you. I have a Playground where you can write some Imba code, and it's using the Monaco editor.
Yeah.
So maybe we could get something like that on imba.io, and then just to experiment. So because the Gitbook stuff, it's yeah, it's okay, but I don't like the rendering. Like, I wish
Yeah.
we had our own syntax highlighting and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it would be nice to get that back.
Yeah, I think we should. And I'm already playing around with it because of the tooling. I had to update a Monarch syntax that does semantic highlighting of variables and stuff like that. And I am also thinking about like looking at how we can quickly convert the text editor from Gitspeak to Imba 2. That's a very isolated, relatively small project. And if we do that, I think we are really close to being able to do our own Gitbook-like concept. I think that's a good use case actually for the language, to make sure that it's ready, is to have to create the new Imba.io with search and with documentation like the documentation we have on Gitbook. But that's for another discussion as well, I think.
No, it sounds like a good idea. So yeah. I still have some few topics left. So how much time do you have?
I have minus 15 minutes, around that. Could we do a short follow-up meeting soon, like maybe even later today or tomorrow? Because I have a kid here and I promised to be done by 10.
Yeah,
initially.
That's fine. So I can get the other topics later.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
Great work.
Perfect.
Bye.
Thank you. Likewise. Talk to you later.